Derrick, how's it going?
Man, I'm doing great, brother. It's good to see you, man. Blessed to be alive and still doing what I love, man.
Facts. Facts. What have you been up to lately?
Yeah, so, lately, obviously we've been working together, which I think has been dope.
Yes.
But man, it's been about just being consistent with my YouTube content right now, right? So,
Yeah.
Instagram, over the last year, really, even since the pandemic first started, I was just nonstop putting out videos. And so I think now it's being more calculated with my content, right? So I've kind of pivoted over to YouTube a little more. Over the last 5 weeks, I've put out covers nonstop. And really, the goal with that is to generate a really good subscriber base so that when I do start and rolling out my original content that I plan on, working on the next 3 to 6 months, that will allow me to have a following. And so I think what's really interesting is that you almost think that like everyone kind of has an idea of what you do, like, oh, that's DG Sax, he plays the saxophone, he's a musician, but like there's so much more discovery that needs to take place. So I feel like that's where I'm at still, and creation's coming. So
I peeped the channel. I'm of course I follow you on Instagram. You've been doing the sax covers on there for a while. I peeped your YouTube channel after we shot the mini doc we're gonna put out for you, and you're doing some decent views on some of those videos. You got like a few thousand on one of them. So that was pretty impressive.
yeah, man, I appreciate it. I think it's all about like the key hashtags and algorithms too, right? And not every video is going to be perfect. Like I had uploaded like 30 of my IG videos when I originally started my YouTube channel. And so now I'm at a point where I'm still shooting, with my iPhone. I think that's one thing I would stress to people. You don't need this high tech camera to get started with any type of content. If you're a musician out there, if you're someone that is, currently just trying to figure out a way to, build your brand, right? Because that's essentially what you're doing. I was
Yeah.
watching this YouTube live the other day. One of the things they talked about was like, at the end of the day, you're on YouTube, right? And
Hmm.
essentially, by you building your platform, yes, you're building up YouTube, but more importantly, you're building up your brand. So, like, that's how you really should be thinking about any of these platforms that you're on, is that you're trying to build yourself up as opposed to the platform, if that makes sense.
Totally. And it's funny you say that because I started on YouTube a few years ago just because I thought being a vlogger would be like the coolest job that I could possibly have. And there was like a little like, I think I wanted to prove to myself to like my classmates and stuff. So there's a little insecurity in there. But now I've kind of like fallen off myself just because like I feel like kind of insecure about putting myself out there. But this is kind of like, I've been starting to post a little bit more on Instagram. This is the first episode of this podcast we're doing, and I'm doing it not because I'm like so excited to like try to be an influencer or something, but more like so I can build my brand up myself. So was that something for you that was a little scary? Was putting yourself out there scary? Um, and what did that bring out? Like, what did you feel the first video you put out on Instagram? Because I remember how I felt when I put out my first YouTube video.
Man, so my very first video went out Christmas Eve 2017,
Uh-huh.
right? So that's like we're talking almost 4 years ago now. But I remember actually being at the School of Rock. Lady by the name of Amy Renzulli. If you don't know her, now you know her. She's the owner
Legend.
of School of Rock in Oak Park. She's incredible. And essentially, I was in college at the time, but I was like doing an internship, right? So I actually created my own internship by utilizing her space. I gave her a call one day. I was like, hey, I'm looking to start creating my own content and I need to figure out a space where I can do it comfortably. And so she invited me to her space. I remember doing the video, that was my first time syncing the audio with the digital, camera and that whole thing. So I was actually borrowing my dad's camera. He's got a Canon and, it specializes more on the picture side, but it had 13 minutes of video storage that I could utilize to get a clean shot. And so I remember just like, practicing the song and then like preparing it. So I ended up doing All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey. And so I dropped it
I
Christmas Eve.
saw that.
It was, yeah. So, looking back at it now, I'm like, man, that was such a terrible video, but it's the growth, right? And so I think when I first dropped it, it was just more like I was very proud of the work that I put in. And I wasn't really at that point, I wasn't really concerned about what others thought. I was just like, I'm proud of it because I see how far I came in terms of just my development and like how much I learned in that process of just doing. And I think that's so important. You get more out of just doing as opposed to just worrying about what's the next person gonna say. So
Totally. So was it like just pure motivation to make another?
it definitely was because, even after that, you get the feedback, you get people saying, wow, I didn't, there were a lot of people after that video who didn't even know I played saxophone. And I mean, these are people that have been knowing me for years, like people I grew up in, grade school, middle school, high school. And everyone's like, man, I didn't even know you played the sax. And here I am assuming and thinking that, people know this. And that made me come to the realization that like I have to continue to do this because, well, one, I love it. I love playing the sax, but I saw the impact it made on people, and that just kind of fueled me more to like say, hey, let's have some fun, like let's keep doing it. So I kept searching up different songs. I'm inspired by J. Cole, Wale, Joey Badass, Kendrick Lamar, all these hip hop artists, R&B. They incorporate a lot of saxophone into their music, and that's what kind of inspired me to like keep going and just like try out some of their songs. So
How has that helped you? How has that affected like your skills, I should say?
yeah, great question. I think for me, it created a routine. It created repetition, right? Consistently doing something, and then finding ways to tweak the process as you do it. But then it's like, you create the muscle memory, and the work doesn't become as rigorous, quote unquote, because you turn into a habit. You build this skill. And I think it really just complemented what I was doing well at that time when I first started, because I started working with like different bands across the city, coming up high school and all that kind of stuff. Like I was playing in the jazz ensemble, but you got to think 2017, I'm in college at this point, and I'm still in the band, but I'm at this phase too where I'm like, man, it would be cool to like start working with different artists around the city and like just kind of branch out, and I think once I got to college, that allowed me to make a really good transition for myself musically.
What kind of artists did you start working with in college?
Yeah, so in college, I had a chance to actually work with a guy by the name of Independent. His actual name is Daniel Weisberg, and he actually went to OPRF, Oak Park River Forest High School, for those who know where that is. He was a couple years older than me at the time, but we actually knew each other from elementary school. Like I remember back in the day, like we were like really into Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff. Like we would actually like play Yu-Gi-Oh together, right?
Oh yeah.
And so he's at the time now he's going to Columbia College, and he's looking to become an artist. He's studying music and basically business entrepreneurship and artistry. That's what he was really into. Very talented artist, and he was looking for a saxophone player. He said that he had a sax player that pretty much ditched him and was, didn't show up to a gig that he had, and was looking for someone to bring on board. And I said, I would love the opportunity. So that happened. He brought me into a rehearsal and, gave me songs to practice. I practiced them. And from there, it was a W. Like we just got in the works. And from there, that stemmed off into a lot of different live performances.
So did he ever like blow up?
Well, I would say he has definitely grown. I wouldn't say necessarily blow up. And however you want to define that, right? Because, in today's age, blow up can mean a lot of different things to whoever. That can mean like, oh man, over 1 million listeners on Spotify, or over 10,000, followers on Instagram, right? It's really just what you define it as too, I feel like, as an artist. Because, for me, like, I feel like blowing up for me personally is like when I start seeing how my streams, right, my YouTube, eventually my Spotify, and all these other outlets that I'm creating for myself, when that starts creating generational wealth, as I like to call it, that would be how I would define it as blowing up, you know. But we did a lot of great performances that he had never did once before. Like we went to Taste of Chicago, which
Oh,
was
wow.
great, right? We performed on WGN News before, which was incredible. And that also opened up the door for me to work with other artists because people saw that I was working with him. They were like, man, the sax sounds great. Like, yo, we should work together. So that opened up a lot of doors for me as well, you know.
Speaking of wealth and then working with other artists, what was the first time you got paid to play the sax, and what was that like for you?
First time I got paid to play sax, I did a studio session with a guy by the name of Jams, the Flavor Child, right? And so Jams and we met for myself working at Adidas at the time. So I was working as a sales associate. He came in the store and we started chopping it up, right? We had a great, story, and he was telling me that he did music. I was asking, what does he do? He's like, I do music. I said, great. I'm a musician. He's like, dude, that's awesome. Let me see some of your videos, right? So 3 weeks later, he sends me some music and it was like, man, I want to do a studio session with you. I come to his apartment off of Lakeshore Drive at the time. We're working for like 4 hours straight. Next thing I know, this man's handing me a check and I'm just like, whoa, like, I didn't expect this. Like, I'm not even here for this. It's just the experience for me. And he said, at the end of the day, I just want you to know that like, I respect your craft and like what you bring to my music. So at that point, I started coming to the realization that like music wasn't just something that was going to pave my way for college and, help me to pay off tuition and stuff like that. Music can be a tool that will allow me to generate wealth, beyond my years. And so it's my job now to figure out how can I utilize the talent that I have been given and my work ethic to put those two things together and really find my own niche, because I didn't take the traditional pattern of like, going to a music school and getting a degree and learning all these different instruments. Like saxophone is what I love. And I don't even come from a music background. It was really me being inspired by those around me, my parents listening to smooth jazz, hearing the saxophone constantly. And now that I see the vision more and I've been able to work with other artists, I'm ready to now step into my own with that, So I think that's really where I'm at with everything.
Yeah, I feel like there's like something to be said for the person who I feel like there's something to be said for the person who kind of doesn't they're not taught a curriculum. They just kind of like self-discover their own craft and their own process and their own way of doing things. A lot of artists, a lot of filmmakers, a lot of guitarists, like I'm pretty sure like Jimi Hendrix was self-taught. Like there's a lot of like, I feel like that's where you find the geniuses a lot of the time. So like, how do you feel like what have you discovered about yourself through teaching yourself music?
It's man, that's a really interesting question. I guess where I would start with that is music. Music is 80% the spirit in who you are. Like that's number one. A lot of people think that, or musicians or whoever may think that, oh, the best equipment is going to make me the best player. And that's absolutely false. Like if you don't put in the time, if it's not something that if you're not passionate about it, those are all the key ingredients. And so I think a lot of what music has reflected back to me is who I am as a person, right? I try to be genuine. I try to, just treat people with the utmost respect and understanding that what you put into something is what you're going to get out of it. Thankfully, because of the environment that I've been surrounded by, that's built a lot of confidence in me at a young age. And so I think like, whether it's like music I was playing specifically that maybe I didn't think I could play, or, oh man, how am I going to learn this song? I think having that confidence of just like going through it and not really concerned about the end result has allowed me to just like surprise myself in some ways, like there could be a video or a song that drops and I'm just like, I got to get this out here, and how am I going to do it? And then I've surprised myself by getting it done because I think of the repetition and, the habits that I've created.
And then every time you play, is it easier the next time?
I wouldn't necessarily say easier, but I would say that you have to, I think depending on the environment you're in too, right? Like right now we're in this like virtual space too, where like you've got virtual events, you're doing a lot of, just like in your room type performances, unless there's like a smaller crowd. I think for me, music is energy. Like if you're in the midst of a huge crowd, you kind of dictate how you approach the situation too, like depending on the venue. Like if there's 40 people, or like let's say it's a very intimate gig where you've got, bring your own wine, bring your own bottle, you've got people kicking off their shoes, they got their blankets rolled out. You think of that kind of vibe, you don't want to be like too over the top. You probably don't need a microphone in that setting. You may just need something that's just gives enough to keep the audience engaged. Whereas like if I'm at a huge venue, let's say I'm playing at United Center or wherever, that type of environment brings a different type of atmosphere. And so I think that's what kind of gauges like how you approach the situation. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's easier. It's all just like, it's very situational. Music can be very situational.
Hmm. I feel that. Yeah. Um, you said something earlier about how people feel like the best equipment is gonna get the best result. I feel like there's a similar thing in filmmaking too, where it's like I actually purposely don't have the best equipment. I bought like I have really good equipment. I'm very grateful for the equipment I have. I want to preface it with that, but I don't have any. I don't shoot in 4K, which is like the glamorized like standard of what people should be shooting in. Simultaneously, everybody posts videos in 1080, so it doesn't even really matter. So I just skip that whole thing, just because of the workflow and the process I like to use. So I've actually foregone like the best equipment so that I can keep the process that I want to have, which I think is paying dividends now. But obviously, I have a long way to go. But I want to take it back to the performance thing now. You went on tour, and that's kind of what part of our documentary is about. And I kind of want you to touch on that experience. Like, what's it like to go on tour? Yeah, just start there. What's it like to go on tour?
Absolutely, man. Tour was something that I had like, when I was working with different artists, when I was working with independent, Shai Tulani was another artist that I had met through independent. Um, I had always had the thought was lingering in my head, like, man, what if I ever go on tour? Like, what would that be like? I think that would be such a cool experience, and like going overseas and like playing outside of the country. Like that was just like such a vibe in my mind. I'm like, man, that would be so dope. And one day that became a reality, where I was, offered to do a tour. So I performed with Jams, the Flavor Child. And this is like 2 years into our relationship with one another. And that's the thing. I think, from that first experience we had, it became more than just music, right? So we developed this brotherhood and this trust, right? And I think that's where the tour really comes in, is the people you bring along are people you trust, people you feel are going to have your best interests at heart. You will, you may have times where you disagree on things, but it's only for the betterment of the situation. And, for Jams and myself, we've always been go-getters. We've always been guys that, we want to bring the best out of our performance possible. And so like, we're not satisfied with mediocrity. We want to do things that are going to elevate us and really just put us in a better position with what we're trying to do. Like he's trying to grow, I'm trying to grow. And I mean, there's been a lot of growth since we were on tour. I mean, this is now 2 years ago almost now. So it's pretty incredible to think about that experience, that moment in time, and then being able to fill out the energy, from other cities. So pretty amazing.
Totally. What did that teach you about how the impact you want to have as an artist, that tour?
Yeah. So, what that taught me as far as just, energy wise, you never know how the crowd's going to respond to you. quantity or the amount of people in the audience don't determine like, you know, how lit it's gonna be. You know, like people think, oh man, it's gonna be 300 people here. It's about to be lit. Mind you, you're talking to someone that literally off their first show, it was sold out. You probably had like 400 people there, and you're thinking like, man, like there's no way this isn't gonna be lit, you know? And people are just standing there. I get on stage, people are just standing there. We're playing different songs with different type of, you know, just frequencies and melodies and stuff. And, you know, we're thinking, man, like, how do we get through to this crowd? You know, so I think it teaches you that as an artist, right? That like, you never know based on the situation, you just never know what the energy may be like. But ultimately you can focus on what you can control. And I think that's so important, right? Because music is the universal language. Whether or not everyone connected with it, I know it's important that like I stay true to who I am, because you never know who may be impacted by what you're doing, you know, while you're on stage.
Totally. So my batteries on this laptop's about to die, so I think we should wrap it up soon. But to wrap up this conversation, what what is your goal? What is your hope for when people see our film together, and what is the impact you hope to leave just in general with your music, with the content you create, with the content we're gonna create together? I'd just love to hear, and I'm sure.
You know what's to come for the future, and with this video is that I want people to get to know who I am, right? I want people to understand my story and build curiosity about, man, what else is to come for DG, because he still has a lot to offer, and there's so much more that he has to show to people. So I'm excited to kind of give a different side of like some of the experiences I've had that I've never really broadcast to individuals outside my network. So I look forward to just seeing what people can take from it and just utilize it as fuel to your own story, you know, build it onto your own and really create your own story. That's really why we're all here, is to live out our purpose. And so I think this will give you some insight into that, and more to come with that as well.
100%. Beautiful way to end it.